My sister slept with my fiancé on our engagement night. Family took her side. Now, 5 years later, she's begging me for $75K due to debt, but I refuse to offer any assistance. I, 29F, just received a call from my mother, with whom I had not spoken for about 5 years, informing me that she required my assistance due to a catastrophe that my sister and her husband had lately experienced. To put things in perspective, the man who is currently my sister's husband was meant to be my spouse. My sister, 27, once upon a time. 20:09 a.m., I'll name her Melissa, hooked up with my fiancé, Lucas. On the day I became engaged, after nearly 5 years of dating, Lucas proposed to me. We had been together since college. To surprise me on the eve of our engagement, he had organized a party. I vividly recall thinking I was the best person alive until approximately 10 o'clock at night when I went outside to get a better reception and saw my sister having sex with Lucas. For the first few seconds, they were so engrossed in their intense kissing that I was standing there staring at them with my mouth hanging open. I was in shock that he was subjecting me to this. Exactly 1 year after we first became engaged and on the eve of our engagement. When they did notice me at last, they promptly fell apart. However, it was already too late. I sprinted out, hopped in my car, and headed as quickly as I could to the closest motel. I was so stunned by what I'd seen that I was having hyperventilations. I was wishing it not to be true, somehow processing it. However, Melissa later texted me to apologize, stating that she was in love with Lucas and that they had reportedly been together for a very long time. When I saw that text, I was in the hotel room, and I started crying like I never had before. Following this, Lucas texted me essentially saying that he had only asked because he thought he would be able to get rid of Melissa from his mind if he committed to me. That had obviously not worked, and only increased his desire for Melissa. He explained to me that this was about them, and that they simply knew they were meant to be together, not about me. I served as merely a stand-in, and how Lucas will eventually get to meet Melissa. I spent a few days at the hotel trying to get my act together because I was still delusional, and I was trying to convince myself that life was simply pulling a cruel joke on me. I eventually returned home after nearly 4 days because I had to get my belongings and report back to work in order to avoid being fired. Upon my return home, I discovered that my family had been residing under the same roof with Lucas while they awaited my return. It would be verging on becoming intimate if it weren't for the circumstances surrounding my departure. After I vanished, people had been frantically trying to text me and get me to reply, but I hadn't answered any of them. It goes without saying that when I eventually returned, everything was in disarray, and everyone made it a point to give me hugs and express how happy they were to see me. When Melissa spotted me, she even had the gall to approach me and offer me a bear hug while crying. I just remained there like a silent statue as everyone clambered about me because I was too shaken up to even respond to that. After everyone had finally calmed down, I cleared my throat and informed them that I was returning, but my intention was to grab my belongings and permanently move out. Up until then, Lucas had just been standing there silently. However, he declared that I didn't need to move out because he had already packed his belongings and was moving in with Melissa when I told him I was leaving. Now that everything was public knowledge, it was all over. My parents, my aunt, and my family. Even though there was nothing to smile about, my dad's younger sister and her spouse, who have lived in the same house since her husband's death, truly had broad smiles on their faces. At least not in my opinion. Melissa was awkwardly hugging Lucas on the side while grinning broadly and giving me a somber expression. When I could take it no more, I decided to ask my family, what in the world was making them smile? Because Melissa had just called off our engagement and taken my partner of almost 5 years as far as I was concerned. This was not really humorous or endearing. At that moment, my mother made the decision to speak out. She informed me that although they could not go back in time and alter the past, they could accept the future and knew that Melissa and Lucas would be there. They felt bad about it, of course, as it was a relationship that had been built on infidelity. But they also wanted me to realize and accept that this was for the best. Melissa expressed her regret for separating from me and my boyfriend, saying that she was unable to resist falling in love. It seems that they were deeply in love and desired to spend the rest of their lives together. She wishes she could have told me sooner, so I wouldn't have to find out this way. Subsequently, they shared a kiss just in front of me. and my mother even dared to wipe away a tear from her eye. I lost my cool and informed them that what they were doing was nasty and that this wasn't meant to be sentimental or emotional. To my surprise, my relatives told me that I was being too spoiled about the matter and appeared to be irritated with my actions. They didn't like my behavior, so I was making this about me rather than being happy for my sister. Their attitude about this astounded me, and I instructed them all to get the hell out of my house right then. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out how they were supporting Melissa and Lucas's actions, painting me as the villain and acting like I was exaggerating. My father stepped in and told me to stop acting like a little kid, that these things happen and I should learn to accept it. He desired for me to rejoice that my sister had at last discovered her true love, rather than feeling envious of her. I was literally at my wit's end with the way they were acting. I simply said, "Screw it!" Entered my room, gathered a few of my belongings, and then departed once more without even exchanging words or waiting to hear them out. Even when they yelled my name and warned me not to leave, it was obvious to me that they were more concerned with Melissa and her happiness than with me or even with right and wrong. So I totally ran out of things to say to them. They entirely disregarded that I was a human being with actual feelings, since they were preoccupied with trying to defend what Melissa had done. My family made multiple attempts to get in touch with me after that day, but I never answered since I didn't feel like I owed them anything. I even received an invitation to Melissa and Lucas's wedding a few weeks later, but I turned it down. Naturally, Lucas and I had a lot of similar acquaintances, and they all turned down the invitation to the wedding in support of me. A few relatives who were aware of the situation even stopped interacting with my family after finding out how they had treated me after the party. I've essentially cut them out of my life for the past 5 years. Every now and then they would try to worm their way back into my life by wishing me a happy birthday or happy new year, but I would always brush them off. I deleted them from my friend and following lists, but I never even blocked any of them. I wanted them to see what I was up to, but since my account is public, they could. I wanted them to see that I was living a wonderful life and to continue to be envious of me. Though trivial, it was the least I could have done in light of how they had betrayed me. Furthermore, until lately, I had no idea what they had been doing for the past few years. About 4 days ago, my mother called me from a number I hadn't stored. I tried to hang up as soon as I answered the phone and saw it was my mother speaking, but she pleaded with me for a chance to speak with me, because it sounded like they needed help badly. I agreed to speak with her for a short while because I couldn't bear to ignore her at that point because she sounded so distressed. She informed me that a few years prior, Melissa and Lucas had launched their own company, but it was failing miserably and their investors were pulling out since they were not turning a profit. They took out further loans as a result. However, that didn't improve their business either. They were engulfed in debt at this point, and loan sharks were after them. Everyone from their workers to their investors to the folks they had borrowed money from was pursuing them. My mother had come to me as a last resort and was pleading with me to help them by lending them some money so they could pay off their debts because she knew that I led an opulent lifestyle and could afford to assist them. She was also asking me for a substantial sum of money. She asked for approximately $75,000 from me so she could support Melissa and Lucas. I questioned her why she was having my mother speak to me on Melissa's behalf and why Melissa wasn't calling me if she needed help. My mother informed me that Melissa and Lucas had given her specific instructions not to approach me, so they were unaware that she was coming to me for assistance, since everyone, I suppose, can still recall precisely what transpired 5 years ago. My mother didn't know anybody else who would have that type of money and would give it to them at the drop of a hat. But Melissa didn't want me to know about all of this and wasn't prepared to accept my support. After a few months, Melissa and Lucas were having trouble even putting food on the table. Even the Lucas family was trying to give them everything they could, and my parents were doing everything they could to help, but it was simply not enough. Furthermore, they needed to be able to sustain themselves in the long run. Therefore, it was not feasible for them to just donate all of the money they had collected over the years, particularly since Lucas's parents and the majority of my family were retired. And that's the reason my mother had phoned me to ask for assistance when she ran out of other options. Even though I could now afford to assist them, I truly didn't want to. Melissa was right to refrain from reaching out to me for assistance. They were no longer able to demand anything from me. The day they had an affair with me, I informed my mother that even if I could help them, I wouldn't. My mother informed me that I was being cruel and that I should consider my family, sounding extremely concerned. I informed her that neither Melissa nor Lucas had given me any thought during their affair, nor had my family considered me while they were providing for them. I didn't need to think about them at that moment either. I wasn't about to go drop $75,000 on two people who didn't even deserve it. I'd worked hard to earn where I was. Then, my mother broke down in tears over the phone, telling me that she had no idea I would become such a conceited adult, and that if I didn't help my sister and her husband, they would get into serious problems. I told them it was simply too bad, but there was nothing I could do. I hung up after that. Ever since, my mother has been pleading with me via multiple SMS every hour to give it a second thought and consider my sister. She declared that Melissa was in very serious trouble and that this was not the time for small-time retaliation. I would therefore sincerely regret not helping her now. She's acting strangely, and I'm not sure how to respond to her, because I don't want to seem like the bad person for not supporting my sister financially after she kidnapped my fiancé 5 years prior. First update. At last, I blocked my relatives. I hadn't done that before because I wanted them to know what I was up to and be envious of me. And B, because I didn't really care at the time, and I believed cutting them off completely would be something I would regret if something horrible happened to them. 5 years ago, I should have had them taken out. Why I even kept them around for this long is beyond me. That was my petty behavior. It's not petty to refuse to assist my sister at this time. It makes sense to proceed in this manner. They had already squandered an enormous amount of money. Furthermore, I have no doubt that they won't be able to pay back the money even if I give it to them now. Furthermore, $75,000 is a substantial sum. Even if I may be wealthy, I still can't just throw away that much money and expect it to grow back. Hey, I would still expect the money back if I was aiding a close friend of mine. And this one, I can't expect these people to return the favor because they aren't my loved ones or close friends. Thus, I really have no incentive to assist them. That is all there is to it. I discussed this with a few friends to obtain their thoughts, and they both felt that I had made the proper decision in declining to pay them the money, not even because of a desire for vengeance, but largely because it was utterly ridiculous and unrealistic for me to even expect them to repay me for the times they had betrayed me. But in any case, I don't need to worry because my mother has been blocked and can no longer reach me to guilt-trip me. Second update. Hello everyone. Thus, a very significant event occurred today. My neighbor called me while I was at work to report that there was a pair outside my house yelling for me to come outside and speak with them. They had been shouting at the door for about an hour and wouldn't go, according to my neighbor, who said they seemed very wild. I asked her to describe them, but I had a sneaking suspicion who it was. Her description of their appearance only served to reaffirm that I would definitely run into Melissa and Lucas when I returned home. As my neighbor didn't think these two were up to anything, I agreed that they could never be up to anything when it came to Melissa and Lucas. She told me I needed to come back and take care of this. I thanked her and then got in my car to head back home because there was no way I could risk them breaking into my house. Fortunately, I arrived in about 15 minutes, and I was able to stop them in their tracks as they attempted to pick the lock on my door in order to gain entry. I tried to contact the police as soon as I pulled up in front of my house and asked them what in the world they thought they were doing. But Lucas was faster than lightning and came running over to me, snatching the phone out of my hand. Melissa also approached me and said they didn't need anything from me. They were just here to talk, not just now anyhow. In addition to telling them to hurry, I advised them not to expect an invitation inside. Therefore, they had to discuss whatever was on their minds outside in the yard. I honestly didn't believe that inviting those two within tight quarters would be a smart idea, so it was a relief that they seemed to be cool with it. They claimed they didn't want anything from me, so I wasn't sure what to expect given how hostile they already looked to be. Melissa began to speak, telling me that our mother had informed her about the phone conversation, that I had disregarded her subsequent texts, and that I had even blocked them all. She informed me that I should really be over it by now, because it had been 5 years since then, and the way I was acting was incredibly unjust. Rather, I was turning to such petty and theatrical performances in an attempt to garner some small amount of attention for my family. She said that my refusal to assist them had deeply offended her. She was here to speak with me about that, too. Although she had been able to arrange the funds for the time being, she acknowledged that there was a good possibility she might require further in the future. Moreover, she was obviously unable to repeat the transaction because she had sold their home and all of their valuables to raise the funds this time. She had to be aware that she could rely on me and that I would be there to support her in times of need. I informed her that I detested her and her spouse intensely, and that she could not, under any circumstances, rely on me. I told her that it would be better if they simply left because I was so furious that I was having a hard time controlling myself not to hit her right now. Lucas boldly declared that they would not go until I signed a document committing me to giving them money anytime they needed it in the future. Really, if I had to sign it under duress, it wouldn't even be legal. They must be crazy if they truly believed they could get me to sign something like that, and I'm pretty sure there are laws against it. Melissa shoved me when I told them to get the hell out and claimed that I had to help them because, well, they were family and I couldn't just up and leave without doing my part. I was prepared to slap her because I couldn't believe she had actually shoved me. However, I resist the temptation to act on it because using violence would just make matters worse. Rather, I chose to take hold of my phone, which had dropped to the floor after Lucas knocked it out of my hand and fled. As soon as I could, I got into my car and left without even looking in my rearview mirror. It didn't take me long to get a head start on them because I hadn't thought to turn off the engine before leaving the car. Unfortunately, they were obviously not stupid enough to follow me on foot, so they merely waited there at my house. Upon reaching a secure distance from them, I made the decision to notify the authorities of the situation. After that, I returned home by car just in time to see that the cops had shown up 20 minutes earlier. After I told them everything, they detained Melissa and Lucas and took them away. Even though I knew the accusations weren't that serious and they would likely get off easily, it was still worthwhile because they were at least removed and I wouldn't have to waste my time with them any longer. I haven't heard from any of my family members in a few hours, which is odd because I would have thought that by now, at least one of them would have attempted to get in touch with me via another number, but they haven't. I'm assuming that they're either waiting it out and biding their time to get in touch with me later, when things are a little less stressful, or they're just over everything and won't try to get under my skin again. 3 updates. Hello. Since I had called the police on Melissa and Lucas, I honestly began to think that my family would no longer disturb me, but I was mistaken. The previous update was approximately a week ago. They nevertheless bothered me again in spite of that. And this time, my parents were the ones who knocked on my door and asked to have a brief conversation with me. They seemed far less haughty and conceited than Melissa and Lucas were when this happened yesterday, so I let them in. Almost as soon as she stepped inside the home, my mother broke down in tears and apologized to me for ever siding with Melissa rather than me. My father informed me that they couldn't bring themselves to look at Melissa and Lucas the same way, and that they had decided to cut them off after learning that they had been arrested due to their behavior, in addition to the fact that they had shoved me. Throughout her visit, my mother did not stop crying. My father clarified that they were sorry for supporting Melissa in the past, even though I was the one who was harmed. Even if I did express my gratitude to them for at last realizing their mistake, it was already too little, too late. I didn't want to go back to prioritizing my family over myself because I was accustomed to living my life on my terms today. Even though I was grateful for their visit and their apology, I didn't think it would be worthwhile to try to mend the connection, even if it was with my parents. As a result, I couldn't guarantee them that I would work on it. At that point, they somewhat objected, saying that we could correct this if we so desired, but it was precisely the source of the issue. I was done wanting to do it. All I wanted was to be left alone, and I informed them that although I appreciated their work, my time here was up. After a while, they left looking a little let down and requested if I could unblock them at least so they could communicate. That's it, I suppose. I unblocked my parents, which is strange.